Now, since the start of that war in Ukraine, the calls for the government to increase the spending on defence have been louder. Some MPs were calling towards moving to 3% of GDP on spending rather than the 2% we maintain at the moment. 2 weeks ago, the Chancellor presented his spring statement, but there was nothing new on the defence budget within it. Well, joining me now to talk through these issues is John Spellar, the Labour MP and former Defence Minister. He's been calling upon the government to increase spending on defence. Welcome to the programme, John. I mean, I suppose, listening to people like Kira Rudik, listening to the absolute harrowing situation that we're seeing in Ukraine, there is no doubt public support behind providing lethal aid to the Ukrainians. But of course, that costs money. I suppose a big question when it comes to our defence budget is it being well spent as things stand?
Well, in some cases, it's not necessarily being well spent, and there are real problems in the management of the budget. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we need extra capability, and also that we've got to refocus on the main European plane, where, for example, over recent years, the government have actually been withdrawing from Germany and have now recognised the folly of that. It never made sense financially either, and are having to rebase there and to understand that the front line of freedom is now on the border between NATO countries and Russia, which is behaving very much like the old Soviet Union. And that requires money. And so greater efficiency is obviously right and proper, but it will actually need extra funding as well.
As things stand, the United Kingdom is the largest spender on defence in Europe. We have an impressive capability, and indeed we're one of the two countries in Europe to have an independent nuclear deterrent as well. I suppose if we're to increase defence spending, would we not be expecting our allies and friends on the continent to do the same?
Well, of course, some of them are already doing so. And Olaf Scholz's speech to the German Parliament just a few weeks ago signalled a step change in the German approach of moving up to 2%, putting 100 billion euros in. They recognise it's been an open secret for some time that maintenance of their equipment has been frankly shocking, and they're ill prepared. I think there is now a recognition of that, and fortunately a cross-party recognition. But we've got to play our part as well. All countries are going to have to step up to recognise a new reality where the dictatorships around the world are lining up together. And therefore, the free nations, as they did, back in the 1940s, when they had to create NATO in the face of that threat under that post-war Labour government, we have to recognise that this is the new reality, and some of the complacent assumptions that it could be business as usual, they no longer apply.
It's certainly true that 1945 Labour government was instrumental in forming our independent nuclear deterrent, in establishing the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. However, in more recent years, your party, John Spellar, has been less equivocal on the issue of defence. The former leader of your party has been on record as calling to disestablish the British Army. Some members of your party have been calling NATO expansionism, have been describing it in the same or in similar terms that Mr. Putin has. Has the Labour Party really changed on this issue? Or is there still that rump, potentially not in the shadow cabinet now, but certainly on the back benches, that makes all of this discussion so much harder?
Not at all. It's about which is the majority tendency within the party. It's very clear from what our defence spokesman, John Healey, and what Keir Starmer has been saying, that we recognise the nature of the threat from the totalitarian forces not just in Russia, but also in China as well. And indeed, one of the number of reasons why we were not able to win under Jeremy Corbyn was that the public did not trust him on defence. And but bluntly, we've now got to nationally, not with people scoring party political points. We've got to recognise the defence of the country requires a new doctrine, a recognition of the problems in Europe. Remember, Ukraine, originally the invasion of Crimea, was not in response to any expansion by NATO, but actually by Ukraine considering joining the EU. What's the reason for that? Because what Russia fears is actually a successful Ukraine on its doorstep, where people in Russia might start asking why they can't have that degree of freedom, but also that degree of prosperity that Europe has, for example, brought to Poland and to the Baltic states as well, where again, Russia has been pushing away at those states because they present an alternative model, and one which the clique of crooks in the Kremlin find unacceptable.
I think that is particularly perceptive analysis. Clearly, Mr. Putin fears most of all freedom by example, and that there might be a colour revolution in his country where people and their friends and their family, and of course many Ukrainians have family members in Russia and vice versa. If they're to see a successful liberal democracy take place, they'll realise how bad they have it. Well, John Spellar, it's been a fascinating discussion. No doubt this is an issue that is going to increase in salience as the war in Europe drags on. But for now, John Spellar, Labour MP and former Defence Minister, thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing this afternoon.
Thank you.